This is an absolutely anticipated, exciting pleasure. I really want to thank you for being here. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of the people you know, read a lot of your work, and today we're going to have an in-depth conversation about how and why, in my opinion, you're one of the greatest thinkers on the planet. And I know that's a big statement, and I know you're going to disagree with me, but I want to show people how truly innovative your thoughts are, and at the end of it, how on some level it's very simple. And you really, really take the science. So let's first talk about your background. And is it okay if Carlos is okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you have 3 degrees. Most people have trouble getting one. You have a PhD, you have an MD degree, and you also have an ND degree. And let's talk about the PhD and your background. I think it was in biochemistry. Yeah, please tell us about that.
I was very interested in something called life, and has to start somewhere. I found that doesn't start anywhere. It's a continuum. And therefore, to grasp it really well, I started my career, academically speaking, as studying biology, experimental biology. And why did I do that? Because biology is the study of life. So that led me to become interested in an area that I found exciting, that complements biology, and that's physics. So I started doing a little bit of work on biophysics, and I majored in biophysics with my undergrad. Then I had the opportunity to do a master's degree in immunology.
Let me see, so you did biology,
Yes,
study
biology.
of life, and then you started to understand that physics and biophysics was also important to understand for life.
Yeah.
And then the next step, was this in Australia?
No, this was in Mexico. But something that caught my eye and my attention was cancer, because that's what led me into all this. And what is cancer? Why do people have it? How do they get it? How can we treat it? I went with my eyes and my heart open to open a new way in my life called curiosity, finding out why. And I ended up looking into the world of science. So that involved biology and then immunology, did a master's degree in immunology in Mexico. And then I received a scholarship from the Australian government that allowed me to do my PhD in biochemistry. And I went to Australia with the aim of finding out what's the connection between pregnancy and cancer. And
that's unusual, right? Pregnancy.
It's not unusual, because we all come from a trophoblast. We all come from 2 cells that divide into 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And that's a very exciting sort of development that happens in a woman that is pregnant. But it also happens in someone who has a tumor in the making. Cells reproduce pretty quickly. And all of a sudden we find a mass. That mass is called the trophoblast. And both in pregnancy and in cancer, the trophoblast is the mass of cells that make the tumor in someone that has cancer, and makes the core of cells that protect the little tiny thing in there that is called the neural tube that is inside this pregnant woman. And both define the field of immunology, meaning whatever is not yours, you tend to reject.
Oh, wait. This is absolutely fascinating, because I didn't quite understand this till you just mentioned it. So basically, and obviously a fetus or a trophoblast isn't a tumor, but it's a different entity that's inside the woman.
Yeah, but you are getting, you're talking about miles away from each other, because a fetus doesn't happen until 22 months or 22 weeks of gestation. And that's a long way into the pregnancy.
Sure.
Whereas a trophoblast occurs within the first 15 days of pregnancy. So by studying and understanding what's going on in the maternal system when the woman hasn't become pregnant, it's a paradoxical thing. Why? Because there's something there growing inside of her that it shouldn't be there. Why? Because you've got an immune system that is able to get rid of anything that is not yours.
Got it.
It's called selectivity. And when you look at this, people have postulated a number of theories to explain how this happens. So for me, it was an obvious thing to study what happens biochemically and immunologically during the very early stages of pregnancy. And we're talking between the time of fertilization, and this is the event that occurs when the sperm reaches that place in the fallopian tube where it reaches the egg.
Gotcha.
And when that happens, there's only one sperm that gets in, one out of millions, and that was you and me. So just by doing that, we have become the greatest being on the planet because we had a lot of competition going for that place at that time. And it happened, the event of fertilization happened as a consequence of that. The maternal system should send a signal that is systemic so the entire body knows that that woman is now pregnant.
Got it.
And as this continues to develop,
and this signal is so that the mother doesn't reject this new cell, the trophoblast.
Yeah, that's
so
right, that she knows, the entire system knows that there is a new, how can I put it?
New entity?
A new entity developing within her.
Right. And so if you're drawing this analogy, cancer is really a foreign new entity. Is that where the connection is, or please?
Well, it's not really a foreign new entity. This comes back to my favorite topic, talk about love. Why? Because the word cancer comes from the Latin, and it has a root, an etymological root. And we use in Spanish and in many languages that are romantic languages, not in English, of course, because that is not romantic, but in the languages like French, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish. The word cancer has a prefix called can, and then the suffix is ser. Even though that's spelled with C, it's ser, meaning being. And can is that word that in these languages is similar to cansancio, meaning being tired. So when someone says, I'm cansado, meaning I'm tired, and can meet. And what that means is you're tired of being. And when that happens, your body sort of recalls that once upon a time, it had all the instructions to make you being you, because that's what happened when you first form. So the cancer process starts from a lack of communication between you and your body. Your body is telling you something, but you are just numb to the system. You keep on doing what you've been doing. You take an anti in order to counteract something that the body is telling you, watch out, watch out. As you start blocking the body by putting drugs into it to avoid the pain, to release the headache, to release the discomfort, to lower the inflammation, your body is using these as signals that is telling you, please look after yourself. Have a look at what you're doing. Have a look at what you're eating. Have a look at what you're thinking. Have a look at what you're loving. All these things need to be coherent. But if they are not, the body jumps at it and signals you.
Right.
And it can give you a mild diarrhea to start with. But if you don't listen, then it's going to go the other way. It's going to give you constipation because you're blocking that by using something to stop the diarrhea. And in order to stop the diarrhea, another thing says, well, I tried to give you that side, you're not listening. I'm going to go for another way and see if we can spit it out. So I'm going to give you a bit of a cough and see if you can let me know that you're going to look after this. So you start coughing, but you take something to stop the coughing. Then the body says, my God, you're blocking me. You know, so the intensity of the signal becomes increasing. So if it comes to the point that it said, let me show you. Now you got issues in the skin. Now you got not only the mold, but the rash and all that. And you say, my goodness, it's so itchy. Where is it that coming from? Suppression. Suppression of what? Of the signals that you've been somehow blocking, because the body needs to communicate with you. It cannot talk to you. It does it through this thing called symptoms. But they are signs before they become symptoms. And a sign is something that the body tells you. That's what is a signal. It's a sign.
Right.
But if you don't listen to it, it becomes a symptom. And what we do in medicine or whatever is address the symptom.
And is this like, so I know you've had a difficult history with the pharmaceutical industry. Is that what the pharmaceutical industry is doing? Is it's blocking the symptoms? It's
Well, it's addressing the issue from that side. I'm going to make sure that I don't see the sun, so I put my hand here. And that's what you're doing. It's like putting a bandage in something that doesn't need a bandage. But it makes you feel better. There's no doubt that there's been incredible advances since Fleming with the penicillin, since Eli Lilly with the insulin. I mean, these are major breakthroughs. And the pharma industry began like that. The so-called allopathic medicine began like that. Before these people were doing their job, Charles Best in Canada with Eli Lilly, inducing diabetes in a dog and then curing that dog from diabetes using pulsing insulin. That's how the first insulin came along, and that's what Eli Lilly is the company it is now.
Right.
Syntex in Mexico formed because of Ross Markup, a guy who was a hobo in the eyes of everybody, because he couldn't work without being drunk, and he had to really drink in order to get this amazing lucidity, this amazing clearness, where he could actually start extracting from the what we call the wild jam. In Mexico, it's a fungus that grows inside an algae in the lake of Texcoco. And in the early 50s, he found that through that he could isolate digoxin, which is the precursor of the steroid hormones, such as progesterone, testosterone, and all that.
Really?
And you know something?
Interesting.
In those days, these hormones used to be taken from the urine of mares, and people were isolating only milligrams. This guy comes to one lab with a bag saying, I got 2 kilos of progesterone, test that. Right. It never happened. And it did happen because he was very persistent. But they look at him as, you know, you stink, you're a hobo, what are you doing here? He wanted to talk to a chemist to prove this. This is all happening long before I was born. But the amazing thing with this is that this breakthrough allows Syntex to be formed, because Syntex grows from synthesis, and they start developing steroids. And the contraceptive pill came as a consequence of that. So there's no doubt that medicine and the pharma world have done an incredible, beautiful deed for humanity.
So
you know?
that's interesting. Where do you think they lost their way?
I think when money became the main core of all this, because obviously they have to develop this. There must be regulations to this. The WHO, the World Health Organization, has guidelines to work with, and everything needs to have a license to be used to prove that it's safe and to prove that it's like this. So clinical trials began to emerge using these amazing new drugs that were coming to the market, but at the time when they were built, it was emergency. We just came out of a war, and people were dying of infections, and you have to have an antibiotic just like that. So penicillin didn't go through a lot of clinical testing to get people to survive the terrible wounds that they used to have during war.
Right.
You know,
Sure.
And then that's Fleming, of course. But then Eli Lilly, well, how many people that have diabetes? This is an epidemic now.
Sure.
And now we related it to nutrition. At that time, they didn't know anything like that. They only knew about insulin resistance for a number of issues that will occur within the body. But they said, we got the remedy for this. Inject pulsing insulin. And it was just coming from the pancreas of a pig. You know, and
So
all of a sudden, this developed into a beautiful way because it changed the world.
Right. So insulin for type 1 diabetics was life-saving.
Absolutely.
And sometimes insulin for type 2 diabetics is important to get them, but really what I think you're saying is that they really need to change their diet, get
Absolutely.
healthy.
Change the lifestyle
Right.
altogether.
Right.
And even in type 1 diabetes, which is insulin dependent,
Sure.
you still can overcome that. Because the body is constantly changing. This is one of the exciting things about the body. It's always changing. It never stays the same. You have a thought right now, and your physiology changes just like that. You put a smile on your face right now.
I love it.
What has happened? 18 muscles had to move to give that perfect smile. What has happened? You just secreted a ton of endorphins. What has happened? Your blood pressure now is as happy as Larry. Your heart rate is beating like you're the king of the castle. And all of a sudden, you feel absolutely wonderful. A thought caused of that to happen.
And you know, and this, let me stay on this, because this is something I really wanted to talk about with you, because you're an expert in this as well. And it's actually an absolutely fascinating field. And just as a little pre-frame, you know, when I was in college, I took genetics, you know, as a thing, and it was basic genetics. But basically, at that point in the 70s, they thought that DNA was the holy grail.
Absolutely.
That we would be able to diagnose and cure every disease as we started to understand the DNA. But then they found out that there was a more important determinant in your life, and that's something called epigenetics.
Sure.
And this is an absolutely fascinating field. People who are lonely have a different expression of their genes than somebody who isn't. When you eat during the day, what you eat, how much you eat, your emotions, as you said, smiling, being happy, being sad. This is not science fiction. This actually changed the expression of your genes. And I'm sure that you understand. I've read some fascinating things. There's this sequestered town in northern Scandinavia called Overkalix. And they went into these intergenerational effects of epigenetics, how the environment, what you do, what you think affects your genes. And then there's another example after World War II in the Netherlands. And I'm sure you have a dozen more examples. Give us an understanding of the place of epigenetics in your career, your life, and how it can enhance people's lives who are listening to this.
Well, if going back again to the etymologies, the word epi is a prefix for genetics. Mm-hmm. What is epi? Epi simply means above. We got the epidermis, above the skin, okay? Right. And then you have the word genetics. And what is genetics? It's a science that studies the way we inherit traits from our ancestors and we express them phenotypically and genotypically. Genotypically, they could be silent because they are the product of recessive.
Phenotypically, just not to interrupt, but just to make sure, phenotypic is how we look, our phenotype, like physically how we are.
The phenotype is the way we look.
Got it.
The genotype is what makes us look the way we look. Mm-hmm. So the instructions. Right. But the instructions are many, and you've got to be selective as to which one you want to choose. So here we talk about dominance and being recessive. Being recessive means that the character is not expressed, but you've got it. It's not until you find someone in your family line that has the same gene that is recessive, mm-hmm. with another recessive of yours, right. It forms a recessive, and that expresses itself.
And to give people an example that they probably know, brown eyes are dominant, yeah. And blue eyes are recessive.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. So you could have, if you have a brown and a blue, you're always going to be brown, and if two people have a brown blue, they both have brown eyes, but they can have a child who has blue eyes.
Exactly.
And that's called Mendelian genetics, and that's just totally genetically oriented. But then there's all these things that are epigenetically oriented. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
please.
This is very good that you're talking about this because I'm going to take you to another level on this.
Please.
With everybody else, of course.
Please.
And what I'm going to do is just basically give you that example. Mendel was a priest, you know. He was Gregorian Mendel. Mendelism is around. We all studied it. Mendelian genetics has been around for a long time. And we know the experiments that were done in Drosophilas, in the fruit fly, changing the color of the eyes, the shape of the wings, etc. And all this led people to understand more about genetics. That's when Watson and Crick discovered how the DNA fits into a double helix, because their study was not, they didn't discover the DNA, they discovered the way it fits into a double helix. And it was a physicist, Francis Crick, who found out how it was happening.
Really? I didn't know
So
he
he
was a
ran
physicist,
Robert
yeah.
Watson in the middle of the nowhere and said, Robert, got it, let's go to the lab and have a look at this. And they built the first model of the double helix, where they could see the 4 bases. There are 4, there are
Sure.
2 purines and 2 pyrimidines. And these 2 join like a zip. And they said, look at this, isn't this amazing? And it coils into this double helix.
Right.
When that happened, this is when the Holy Grail began, because everybody knew
Right.
that
Everybody
now
thought this
they
was
could
it.
have a model optically seen by crystallography that they said this is the DNA, and they call it the molecule of life. And Life magazine produced a huge article on it.
Sure.
Everybody started talking about it, and we're going to discover 1,000,001 things because now we have found the molecule of life. And they found that that is coding DNA. Only 2% of what you express is coded by that. What is the 98% that is reminding? Oh, we don't know what it is. Let's call it junk DNA. Junk DNA.
So say this again. This is fascinating. So only of the thousands of DNA pairs, only 2.5% actually
coding
right,
DNA.
Exactly.
The other one is called non-coding DNA.
Right.
What is that? They call it DNA, but it was rubbish. They said that's the protein side of the DNA. We don't care about the chromatin. We don't talk about the histones. We only like to look at the nucleic acid, which makes DNA.
Right.
And all of a sudden they found that every single thing that the environment, microenvironment, macroenvironment, the environment within you and the environment out of you that is part of all this, the way that this affects your phenotype is completely independent of the genotype.
Amazing.
And you say, my goodness, what does that mean? Great news, Bruce Lipton. We are not any longer slaves of our genes. We used to blame the genes for everything, even to the point that in court cases, well, sorry, you cannot do anything about it. Sorry, it's in your genome. There's nothing you can do about it. You are free to go,
right.
for something they committed, for something they did, because it's in the genes. Now we know that that's not in the genes, it's in the environment. And it's the way the body looks at the environment and responds to it, more importantly, that matters.
Right.
And this epigenetic thing started from the time of creation. It's a very old science, but we just gave it a name recently. In the 1700s, there was a very amazing scientist, a biologist. He was called Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. And Jean-Baptiste Lamarck started studying giraffes. And they said, how come these giraffes have such a long neck? What makes them stand out of the crowd? And he found, well, the only way and the only reason they have long necks is because what they feed from is found in the top of the branches of trees. So they have to. So the environment is playing a role in whatever these little things are doing.
Right.
And then they start looking at mimetism. A chameleon, for example.
Say it again. What was it?
Mimetism. Mimetism is the ability of an animal to mask itself with the environment that lives in,
Gotcha.
he lives in.
So like a chameleon can change
changes according to the environment. Frogs, stonefish. Look like a stone, and you just name it.
Gotcha.
Camouflaging themselves so that they cannot be caught.
Right.
And then, wonderful and amazing, Charles Darwin comes along and he says, the one that survives out of everybody, because everybody is competing for the same environment, is the one that adapts the best to the environment.
Sure.
That process of adaptation calls for signaling. It needs to know what signals are coming so that I can mimic those and use them to my benefit instead of harming me.
Sure.
And epigenetics began like that.
Gotcha.
In the scientific sense.
That makes so much sense
because it could mask.
Yeah, so because when the environment was so influential on human being, survival, and the people who could adapt to their environment. Now, that just made a connection. So what you're saying is that 2% is dependent on the DNA, the genes, and 98 plus, maybe 97, 98%. Is really on the environmental cues and factors.
Yeah, it's the non-coding DNA that gets that. And the non-coding DNA responds by mechanisms that are chemically driven.
Right.
One is the mechanism of methylation, the other one is acetylation. Of what? Of proteins, such as what? Histones that protect the DNA, and chromatin that makes the chromosomes.
Right.
And now look at where the word chromosome comes from. Goes back to the etymologies. Chromos comes from the Greek word color, light.
Gotcha.
And then you got chromosome. The DNA is packed into genes, and the genes are making the chromosomes and the autosomes. We have 44 pairs of autosomes and only 2 chromosomes. chromosome X and chromosome Y. If we got an X from the mother and an X from the father, we got an XS, we got a beautiful daughter, baby daughter. If we got a Y from the father and an X from the mother, we got a beautiful boy.
Boy.
Those are the chromosomes. What does the word chromosome means? A being of light.
Huh.
We are light
Interesting.
beings.
I didn't know that.
Chromos
And I
means
love words.
color.
Yeah, that's great.
You see, if you can go to the root of the word, as in
Yeah.
everything, you
Right.
get to
I
the
love
point of
words,
what you
yeah.
need to say. So now we know. There was a scientist, an amazing scientist called Alexander Fritz Popp. He is amazing. He's still alive. And he is the guy who discovered this world of biophotons. We are light beings. The body is full of light inside. And the word light comes out in the Bible that you wouldn't believe, like Jesus being the light of the world,
Yeah,
or
the light of
whatever.
the world,
The
right.
scripture you want
Sure.
to put in there. There was light after darkness. There is all this. And
Sure.
the duality began to flow. And what is light? Light is energy.
Good.
And it comes in little packages called quanta. And the light can have something called absorption and refraction. And you can see how things absorb and then others refract.
Okay, I want to get into this because I know another amazing knowledge base of
energies.
yours is quantum energy. I just want to stay on the epigenetics just a
See,
little
yeah.
bit longer. And the reason I want to do that is because just to give some people a few examples of how the expression of your genes, the expression of health, energy, and vitality is so interrelated with this. One of them is that I've studied quite a bit recently is diet. Too much sugar in your diet cues up certain genes that are pro-aging. Too much protein in your diet. How much light you get in the morning cues up your
D3.
epigenetics. 15% of your genome is identified with the circadian rhythm of your life.
Sure.
When you eat, how much you eat. How do they give the listeners some idea of how these epigenetic cues in our day-to-day life are affecting them? Just a couple of examples.
Well, it's very simple. If you got a war in your life, that's a signal. And
Say it
you
again, worry?
A worry. If
Worry.
you're worried about something, it's a signal
Gotcha.
that you're receiving. And your physiology is giving you an answer for that signal. What is happening? Well, physiologically, you are secreting more cortisol, more adrenaline. As a consequence of that, your heartbeat goes higher. As a consequence of that, the renal system begins to activate the angiotensin-aldosterone system, and now you got high blood pressure, and all of a sudden you start finding that will talk to the cardiovascular system, and you start having other complications physiologically that are called pathology.
Right. And it all started
And
with
all
this,
started
with worry.
with a signal
It's amazing. Just
that
a signal.
you decoded for
Yeah.
whatever you were perceiving it to be, because it was not even that.
Right. And then like another example of worrying and stress prevents you from sleeping.
Exactly.
Right?
And the
And-
melatonin is not producing the amounts that it should, because now your serotonin is really down because
Right.
your adrenaline is up.
Right.
Adrenaline and serotonin play antagonistic roles. Serotonin quiets you down and makes you feel relaxed and all that. Eventually produces melatonin and
Right.
go to sleep. Okay? That's how relaxed you can get. But adrenaline does the other thing.
Right.
Gets you moving, pushes you up, as you're here, let's go
Right.
for a run, let's do this, let's do that. So one is counteracting the effect of the other. So this thing about communication is that how we can put these two in harmony. Sleeping does that. Sleeping does that through the circadian rhythm. That has a lot to do with what? With light, because light resonates with light. We are light
Sure.
beings, we resonate with light.
Right.
So, and you can see that in the Scandinavian countries. I have lived in Sweden for a little while. My sister used to be, she's Swede, and she used to be, I went to visit in summer. Beautiful sun, 20 hours of the day is sunlight. And then when you go there in winter, and 20 hours of the day is darkness. And people become moody
Depressed,
and
yeah,
depressed.
yeah.
And during the winter years, in the winter months, it's horrible. A very dear friend of mine that is a friend because he loves what I do, but we know each other. He's a doctor that works in Mexico. He's an ophthalmologist, and he discovered something amazing. The human body is able to do photosynthesis. We can actually nourish ourselves from light through the same process that a plant does it. Therefore,
I've heard
we
about
become
this, yeah.
autotrophs. Okay? And this particular person that is amazing, he has battled along with anyone and everything to get to the point where he is now. And Arturo his name is Arturo Ortiz. It's just amazing what he's been able to do. Why? Because he has demonstrated that we need a pigment that gives color to our skin.
Sure.
And that is the melanin. When you got high levels of melanin, you're healthy. When the melanin starts to drop, you are very prone to become weak in your energy management levels. He now has put together a number of patents in things. He has created a battery that lasts forever, charged with melanin.
Really? That's
So
fascinating.
imagine this in your body. Imagine resonating with the light, because we are light beings, and we resonate
The
with
genetics,
the light.
the epigenetics of light is absolutely
It's
fascinating.
amazing.
It's really fascinating. There's these melanopsin receptors in your eye that are bad receptors for light, but they see the sun and it wakes your body up, and then there's the same. And the other thing I was saying, that a lack of sleep, like one short night of sleep, will decrease the killer cells.
No, let me tell you something about that. That's a bit of a taboo.
Okay.
Sorry to say
Please,
so.
please.
As I said, I'm stirred at times, and here I'm going to stir the water. Because you don't need to sleep that long. People are hooked into sleeping because they said you got to have, when the Industrial Revolution took place.
What, Reverend? Say it again?
Industrial Revolution. The system in our society changed, and people have to work for 8 hours in order to keep the rosters going. 3 rosters of 8 hours, that means you're 24 hours, that means you cover the day and the shift. People say, well, okay, you work for 8 hours, you stay 8 hours sleeping, and you have 8 hours of leisure. Do you have 8 hours of leisure? Not at all. Do you have 8 hours sleeping? Not at all. And do you have 8 hours with your, where you can actually say, I'm going to enjoy myself, and I'm going to look after myself and all that? Well, we don't do that because we are always on the go. This is part of this industrial change.
Modern society.
Everything has to be automated, and we just live like robots, performing. So people believe that you have to have 8 hours of sleep, and they divide it into things. I love neurology. I really do. And I know one of the greatest neurologists living alive, who is alive right here, right now. He's a very dear friend of mine, and his name is Guillermo Garcia Ramos. And it's just amazing how you can actually look into the brain by the brain activity, looking into the alpha waves, the beta waves, the theta waves, and the delta waves. People who study sleep concentrate a lot in the delta region because that's deep sleep.
Sure.
That's when you really are sleeping. The rest is getting you down there. So you got to bring your brain frequency down to a level that you can go from one type of wave, which is a beta wave, that can be measured because they are waves.
Right.
And this measures between
Energy.
18 to 20 to 50 cycles per second hertz. And then if that's the beta wave, that's what we're using right now, being completely aware of things and all that.
Right.
Underneath that, when you relax, you produce alpha waves. And the alpha waves activate another part of your brain that is called the right hemisphere. So you become creative, innovative, you got great ideas, you got great things happening because you integrate the whole thing. You see the whole thing as one big exciting thing. The left side, which is the one that produces the beta waves, sees everything in little dots and pieces and wants to know the why, when, how, who, where of everything. Very analytical. This one doesn't. This one is, wow, it gets blown away by the whole thing. So why am I saying all this? Because when we go to sleep, we need to switch from this high level of activity that is very conscious to another one that will enable us to go down into the well of sleep. And this is obviously regulated neuroendocrinology with hormones and and neurotransmitters and all this.
Sure.
But the amazing thing is what happens to the brain activity. The brain activity begins to drop so that you can go through the alpha state and then the theta state and then the delta state. What regulates that? Epigenetics. Through what? Through your breathing. Because your breathing is constant in every action that you take. But what happens when you get under stress or your breathing changes, goes from deep breathing to shallow breathing. And sometimes you can even pass out.
Sure.
Because if you you
That's right.
hyperventilate,
Right.
okay, and that happens a lot with people who have anxiety. They come to the point, you cannot be anyone. And they go like that.
Yes, yes.
You see?
Yep.
Because they are shallow in breathing. But that is causing the brain activity to go higher into the betas. And you know what? That person won't have any quality sleep no matter
Gotcha.
what.
Yeah.
So you can go to a
Absolutely.
benzodiazepine, which is a drug that Valium type that will take you
Sure.
to sleep. Oh, you can sleep like that. You are having quantity sleep, but never quality
Not
sleep.
quality, right.
And the main thing for quality is to get to the delta
Right.
waves. And to get to the delta waves, what controls that is your breathing. So much so that when you are in that state of fully gone, you wake up everybody, but you don't wake up yourself. How come? Because you snore. And the snore is a noise that is very obvious. Many
Right.
people
Yes.
sleep, and
Yes.
the snoring is, you keep me awake all night, but I don't snore. Oh, that's what you think, but you do.
Right.
And you know something? When you are in that level, you are truly sleeping because you're taking very long breaths, breaths like this. And then sleep apnea might come in and you stop breathing. But if it is not, you go and you start mumbling with your
Right.
lips or whatever, making noises. So when that happens, you are not listening to any of that. But your body is really resting. There is a beautiful communication between that epigenetically with your liver, because your liver will start producing lots of wonderful things. To do what? To keep you alive.
Yes.
Anabolism takes place at nighttime, and it's been studied through circadian rhythms and all that,
Right.
that the liver activates itself between 1 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when you
And
should
just
be
the
sleeping.
anabolism, because you say that, and just to make sure everybody understands, that's when the body repairs and
Repairs
rebuilds.
itself. That's
Right,
when
right.
you take all the goodies that you put in your body the day before,
Right.
and now they've been stored in the liver, and the liver begins to build them up.
Right.
And all of a sudden, if you need a protein for that, well, it's produced to go there. If you need an amino acid that is needed, it's there to be
Right.
useful. And all these, and more than amino acids, polypeptides, meaning enzymes, when they come to work, and your body is just constantly replacing yourself, nourishing yourself, and it does that in 3 hours. Between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning for
Right.
the person that goes to bed at 10 o'clock at night time. But if you go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, well, that will happen for you between 4 and 6 o'clock in the morning, because
Right.
it just goes that way. But you know something? That is quality sleep. And you could only be sleeping there for 3 hours, and you can wake up and you are full on again. Why? Because the body managed to get the brain to activate signals so that the liver can respond to them accordingly.
Gotcha.
And you reestablish yourself. There is a
Beautiful.
very famous scientist that was forgotten, Nikola Tesla, used to sleep only 2 to 3 hours every night.
Really?
I do the same. Amazingly speaking, I don't go to bed until 2:30 o'clock, 2:30, 4 o'clock, 2:30 o'clock in the morning, and I'm up already at 4:30, 5 o'clock. I just came from the other side of the world, and I'm here like charming.
You
like
are.
nothing
You have
ever
a
happened.
lot of energy
And
today.
all of a
That's
sudden
beautiful.
you say, how can you do that? Well, I just go into deep sleep.
That's nice.
And how do you do it? With little power naps. You relax, you go like that, and in no time you are at deep sleep. It doesn't take you the time to get through the theta and then get the delta going so that you can get your sleep with a breath. If you train yourself to breathe according to the way your body is breathing when you are at deep sleep, your body knows where to take you.
Wow, that's great.
So you copy that signal and you match it. And when you match it, your body's taking you to the world of deep sleep. And you know what? You only need a fraction of the sleep that you're saying there. Because it's not about quantity sleep. It's about quality sleep. Most people do not get to quality sleep. And that's why you might say to someone, how did you sleep? Terrible. But how long were you in bed? Oh, I went to bed really early. I went to bed at 8 o'clock, but I'm still so tired. What does that tell you? You'd never make it to deep sleep.
They're not getting into the deep. All right, good.
So you see what I
Right,
mean?
yeah,
Epigenetically, the
Yeah.
signals that are allowing me to do that. If I got a beautiful life, if I'm happy with him, if I got all my needs taken care of, because the only needs that I have is I need to breathe air. Do I breathe air? Of course I do. Well, that's a need that has been fulfilled. So don't tell me that you don't have. We
Right.
want more and more and more. We got the basics. And in nature, we're going to talk about quantum in a little while, but I just want to open that opportunity. Nature always uses the minimum, the absolute minimum amount of energy to give you the maximum benefit.
Right.
And we call that efficiency.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm here.
Path of least resistance, sure.
Is the path of least resistance.
No doubt, no doubt.
And the body doesn't have to waste energy attempting to do something
Sure.
that is attempting. It just does it, as the nakedness ad says. Just do it, and it does it.
And that, that's, and I think we cover the world of epigenetics, how important, and at least because we have a lot of resources on the site about epigenetics and how it affects you intergenerationally, sleep, loneliness, stress. It really is immune system. It's really a fascinating study, and it's becoming more and more popular. So path of least resistance, I cut you off a little bit, but I do want to talk about the quantum physics. Like everybody hears this word quantum physics and they know it's important. They don't quite understand it, and you started to talk about it. How is the understanding of energy on a very, very basic level, quantum level, how has it informed your ability to help people?
In an amazing way, because this is based on nature. Nature uses quantum mechanics, which is the way quantum physics works. Okay, mechanics is the mechanical aspect of it, the way of moving things across. How does that happen? Through vibration. And what is vibration? Well, it's a property of energy when it resonates with something else. And what is resonance? Communication. And what is communication? The flow of information. And what is the flow of information? Coherence. When you have a coherent system, it allows information to flow from the purpose to from the intention, the what to the what for, the purpose. So you do something what for.
So good.
And
This
then
is
you do
good.
a
Take them through that. I want you to repeat what you just said, where from the energy to the what for, because it's so important, and I don't want anybody to miss it.
Yeah, we need to channel our efforts. Everybody says focus. Focus on this. Focus on that. You're too diverse. Focus on that. So when you focus on your intention, on what you want, you need to ask yourself what for. And then when you answer that question, what for, you got a purpose for that what that you just thought of. So the intention now has a purpose. And now you need to have one of the things that Anthony Robbins talks about in his 7 needs of the human being, the need for significance. You, me, and everybody wants to have significance for self and for others. I want to make sure that what I do has an impact on things.
Sure.
So I'm going to have a why. This is the why. And the why is the most amazing thing, because it gives meaning, significance to you and to your life. And the only thing that can give significance and meaning to your life is nothing else but love. And love is energy. And love has the counterpart in the physiology of the body, because we got 3 substances that talk about love. One is the dihydroxyphenylamine. What is that? The famous dopamine.
Yeah, okay.
Dopamine. Dopamine levels go high up when you are in love, but with the feeling of being in love. You are not in love with the person you think you are in love. You are just in love with the feeling of being in love with that person because of the way you feel. So levels rise dramatically.
Right. So an evolutionary psychologist would probably say, well, the feeling of love is the release of dopamine in your brain.
That's exactly what they
Right.
will say. But then
Okay.
I got a better one for you.
Please.
There's another one. The brain is divided into different brains. We got the stem, the brain stem, the
Yeah.
primitive brain, or the reptilian brain, as it's also known.
Sure.
But above it, we have the limbic system. And then we got a beautiful gland called the pituitary gland that is divided into two, the adeno and the neurohypophysis. Out of the neurohypophysis comes two beautiful hormones. One of them it will make you laugh and will make you jump and will make you really feel in love, oxytocin.
Sure.
Oxytocin is just the most fabulous hormone you will ever come across. This is a real molecule of love. And studies have been done in couples that have long-lasting relationships. No dopamine to be found, lots of oxytocin to be found.
Right.
You were talking about the circadian rhythm. You were talking about how we wake up to a world because our brain makes the connections. Without oxytocin, you wouldn't be able to open your eyelids, because oxytocin is the molecule that allows for your eyelids to open every morning when you open your eyes. And that comes as a consequence of having a full concert in your life of the most beautiful symphony there is, the Symphony of Sleep. And why do I call it a symphony? Because all your organs, all your systems are involved in keeping you there, but you are not there. This is amazing. You are not there. You got a body. The body is that what you have. That you have is a body, but you are not your body. You are an entity that has taken possession of this. It's just like you are the driver of your car. Your car is your car, but it's not you. But you use your car to move around. So the body is a car, is a vehicle that you use to live in this planet, in this dimension. That's why we have the physiology and the anatomy that we have, so that we can be designed to be in this environment. So we need two nostrils, we need two lungs, we need two kidneys. We got that duality happening at all times within us.
Right.
Why? Because
We've evolved and adapted to this environment.
We adapted to this
Right.
environment like this.
Right.
And therefore, we are responding epigenetically to the environment because
Sure.
of this process of adaptation.
Sure.
But at the same time, we are so immersed into what we are living that sometimes we forget who we are because we are not our bodies.
Gotcha. Sure.
And at nighttime, we detach from our bodies. So much so that you can be thinking or dreaming of running, of getting away or something. You will never see someone who's sleeping doing this because they said, I'm running a race. You simply run it and you can find yourself sweating and all that. None of that is happening in the body. Why? Because you are not really there.
Right.
And I'm going to give an example of this
Please.
for people that might not understand it. If I were someone that comes from the 1800s, and I will come into the 21st century, and I will come into a house, and I will see this big plasma screen in there, and lots of people doing things there, like you're watching a movie or whatever, or you're
Right,
watching
right,
a
right.
soccer field,
Sure.
a football match, or whatever it is. The person will say, how come all those people fit in there?
Right. It was like when the first movies came out, they had like they were just simple pictures, but it was a train coming at the audience, and people would run out of
Yeah,
the audience. Even though it was
absolutely.
like, yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
And it's like that, you know. The question is, are these people there? The answer is not. So where are they? They are here. Where? Here. In space. But that space, we call it, it was known as a vacuum. This is the vacuum. But it's not. Walter Nernst, who is, he did electrochemistry. He is the guy who worked out the formula to work the membrane potential in cells to look at permeability of ions.
Yeah, how nerves
Moving,
work. And
how all these, we call the nerve impulse in so
Sure.
many things. And you know, the flux of sodium and potassium and calcium and your ionophores and all these things that
Right.
wonderful science has now revealed as to how a cell membrane works electrically. All of a sudden, the same guy says, you know something? That thing we used to call the vacuum, in fact, is not vacuum. It's filled with energy. And
Correct,
when he
right.
said that, he was given the Nobel Prize. 1913.
Really?
And because of that, he just said the energy of the vacuum is nothing else but pure energy. And this energy we can access. And it opened the world to electrophysiology and cardiology, electrocardiology, all these things that develop as a consequence of measuring impulses. Because now we were able to pinpoint electrical circuits within our body. Why? Because thanks to his knowledge, we came to realize that the cells are electrical circuits. And how come? Yeah, it's the equivalent of an RC circuit in parallel. What is that? If you know electronics, R is resistor, C is the capacitor, and parallel is that the resistor is parallel to the capacitor. And these are diagrams that are found in any electrical circuit. But the cell membrane works like that. Amazingly speaking, Bruce Lipton writes this amazing book called The Biology of Belief. And he pinpoints the fact that we are not condemned to our ancestry by the activation of certain genes, because the activation of certain genes depends not on the gene itself, depends on the signals it's decoding from the environment.
Sure.
And therefore we are now free from that terrible slavery that we used to think we were part of.
Right.
And this translates into a new vision of the world.
We really covered a tremendous amount of information. You got into the world of Newtonian mechanics, and those words probably scare people, but it's kind of the old way of thinking about energy, and you really pioneered all around the world a new way of looking at energy. Talk about that and bring it so that people can really get an idea of how powerful this is.
Well, it's powerful because energy is everything that is everywhere. That's my best definition of it. And that breaks apart and breaks away from the Newtonian definition.
Sure.
Because Newton always looked at energy as moving something. And mechanics came from that movement. So kinetics comes from movement. What I'm talking about here is an energy that we all are. We are all love. Love is energy. God is love. Therefore, we can say God is energy. No.
And let me stop you there, because a lot of people, when you mix love and science, they're going to step back. They're going to be like, really? Like, how is he? And what you're saying is 100% accurate, but help people bridge that gap between love and energy.
Very quickly.
Please.
Where does the word love comes from?
Uh-oh.
Again, need to go back to the root. The root is not Germanic, therefore it's not Liebe like in German, or it's not love like in English. Comes from amor. Amor, amore, amour in French, amor in Spanish. It's got a prefix and a suffix. The prefix of the word amor is a, the a, without. Asymptomatic, without symptoms. Aphonic, without sound.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Okay.
And then more. More comes from morten. Morten means death. When you look at and you put this
I never knew that.
two together.
I love words. I never knew
come
that.
to
Oh my
this
goodness.
amazing definition of love.
Uh-huh.
Eternity. Without death. That is eternal. Love is never ending.
Huh.
And you know what? Life is never ending. It's a process of constant change, but never ends. Never started, never ends. Newton gave us this amazing first law about energy. And he said, we can say that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It only transforms from one type to another. Life is a transition. Life is always in defining how we manage that energy. And that energy is managed in what we call time. Seconds that change into minutes, minutes into hours, hours into days, days into weeks, weeks, months, months, years. And then you have a lifetime. All these are little minute changes that occur second by second. Quantum physics says the only time there is the here and the now. The here is the space, and the now is the time. And Albert Einstein with his theory of
Yes, he
relativity,
did, yeah.
made the connection.
Yep.
And he said, the universe is curved, and in the space-time matrix, we treat time and space as one.
Right.
And that is the one point that is here and now. It's called the 0-point energy field. 0-point energy simply means the energy is not zero, it's just condensed so that it can expand. So we got the duality, an implosion followed by an explosion.
Right.
Vasoconstriction and vasodilation, the yes and no, up and down, etc. Now, why am I saying all this? Because energy is a flow. Energy flows, and energy is used in the most efficient way. And nature uses the minimum amount of energy for the maximum output. We already have said that. But this is called efficiency. So we need to find out why is that. It's a product of love. Let me tell you something. We have 4 hearts. I'm going to put my hands like that so you can see I've got 4 fingers. Mm-hmm. The first heart represents the creator of everything, because everything was created for love. So I got my first heart. The second heart is God made man. And we got the masters that have come at different times in the human history that have come to show us and teach us a lesson of love. And here you can talk about Buddha, you can talk about Mohammed, you can talk about Christ, you can have so many of these amazing humans that existed on this planet and changed the law for love. And then we got the third heart. The third heart is the emotional heart, the one that you give away to people. And you say, I love you with all my heart. I'm doing this from my heart. Or sweetheart. You know, I'm telling you, this is my love heart. This is my emotional heart. So that's the third heart. And by this time, I got this. Then comes the fourth heart. The fourth heart is the myocardium.
Mm-hmm. The physical heart.
The physical heart.
Right.
And when I got these fused like that, I end up with this shape. What does that shape look like? That's like a seed.
Uh-huh, it does.
It's called the seed of life.
Uh-huh.
It's like a petal. And this is the shape of the elementary particle that everything is made of. And when we look at this, we got duality, the down and the up. And when you have these, you got cycles, because this forms a cycle, and I will explain that later in another interview. But the amazing thing about this is that everything becomes a seed, and everything starts with a seed. We all come from a seed. It's called the sperm. Mm-hmm. And the sperm has, the head of the sperm has the shape of a seed. The acrosome is right there at the pointing area, and the tail comes here. And this is the shape of a vagina. And inside we got the os, that is the mouth of the uterus. And when you look at that, it's a seed. The seed of light goes through there. So once again, like attracts like, epigenetics, the design of everything is resonance. Everything resonates with everything else. And this is why we can even say that we are, even though we are many, we are one. And the oneness is everything. So quantum physics brings into the realm of life what these amazing bits of information tells us about the world of the subatomic particles, where everything is vibration. At the moment, there is this thing called string theory. Mm-hmm. And Brian Greene here in New York has made a big statement about it, and he's absolutely brilliant in the way he has talked about the elegant universe, where he points out this string theory and also the concept of the multiverse. And in all this soup of energy, we are immersed in. And we work accordingly with efficiency. But that's our internal functioning. The way nature functions is with efficiency, always putting the minimum amount of energy to get the maximum return. So if you want to have a jungle, if you want to have the greatest rainforest on the planet, you got to have the seed that makes it all happen. Mm-hmm. And by having the seed, you got everything.
Beautiful.
And this is why the seed of love, the seed of light, the seed of life flourish in everyone's heart. And this is why we look for the light, because we are light beings. That's why we look for love, because we are love. Our essence is love. But we seem to be forgetting about it because we want to be funny and happy looking at the outside world. We can be really funny. We can laugh at ourselves, get a big smile, get a great laugh, secrete lots of endorphins, control our blood pressure, bring it down, have a great night's sleep, and you will be in heaven. You know? Bringing heaven
Beautiful.
to earth.
Beautiful.
Because you don't need anything else. You got everything that you need. The rest is just a bonus.
Right.
You see, but you are here, and we don't measure these amazing blessings that are coming from the environment that is surrounding us, from love itself. Every single thing has love around it, but we make it such a big deal that we search for it outside, whereas in fact the essence of love is within. Because this is when I connect my being with my humanity, my being, human being. My being is me who is talking to you through energy and vibration. So you can see me through your visible spectra that allows you to see color in me, and the sounds that I'm making, product of the thoughts that I'm having that are traveling, getting into your ear, and your brain decodes that as he's talking to me. But there's more to that.
Right.
Because we are not just a bunch of organs and cells put together.
Yeah, you mean you can materialize everything and just say you're a bunch of photons hitting my eyes and vibration in my drums and it's oscillating my... and you could really break it down into something lesser than what you're talking about when you bring it all together. We could talk here for days. So what I want to do is I want to bring this all together. We talked about your amazing background, MD, PhD, ND, and many other degrees and studies. It's really amazing. And in the beginning, I said you're going to take, you're one of the erudite scientists. You know immunology. You studied biochemistry. You studied medicine. You studied oncology. I mean, many more things. Physics. It really is amazing. And then you boil it down to something as elegant, and I purposely not using the word simple because it's really more elegant. You bring it down to like, it's all about that energy is love. One question that pops into my head, and we talked this a little bit in the preamble, and I want to bring this all together. What does information, and we even talked about the conservation of information. We know that there's conservation of energy. And energy can be either created and destroyed. It can only change form. We talk about the conservation of information, and then we're going to have to do, I'm going to make you come back. We're going to have to do another one of these, but please just comment on that briefly, and then we'll finish up.
Yeah, well, information is exactly what that word means. There is an amazing biologist called Rupert Sheldrake. He talks about the morphic quantum field, the quantum morphic field, the morphic resonance.
Right.
What does the word form means? Things take shape, and information is in the process of something that is taking shape.
Gotcha.
It shares within a quantum energy field called the biofield. We call it in biology that is called an ecosystem, where species interact among themselves, and there is parasitism, commensalism, all these isms that are around, where species combine themselves with each other in order to allow the colony to survive.
Right.
We are one of those among many. And that's what I keep on saying. When you look at this, we are one and we are many. And everything is one and everything is everything. But yet we are part of that everything. And we are everything within ourselves.
There's no separation.
There's no separation.
Beautiful.
And because of that, we are integrated in a system that uses energy in order to blend with the cosmos around us, and that we call our universe. But every one of us lives his own universe. So we are.
What is the root of universe?
Uni simply means one, and verse is
one
type.
verse.
One
Yeah.
verse.
One verse. That's
One version.
beautiful.
And we are many.
Yeah, and you know,
A polyverse.
and and there's nobody And as I said this in the beginning, and I hope the viewers think we delivered, there is nobody on the planet that can articulate that both scientifically and, let's say, philosophically better than you. Is there anything you want to say before we end this and go on to our next, hopefully soon, interview?
Well, what I would like to say as my final remark is that the people that are listening to this and watching this will make a point of loving themselves every day, just a little bit more than yesterday. And not only that, self-love is so important. Self-love is what we receive from God. God meaning whatever name you want to give to the creator of everything. That universal source of love who gives us love. We need to receive it with gratitude. By saying thank you for what I receive, then I can give it away. And as soon as I give it away, I add my love to it. And you know what happens? I can call that abundance. And I just wish for everybody to have an abundant life, including yourself.
And we are so, so thrilled and proud to have you work with us, a thought leader with us. And I'm just going to put you on the spot right now and make you promise you're going to come back and talk to us.
Absolutely. That's my pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Forever. Thank you.